What's going on, guys? My name is Tommy. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another episode of the Forgotten Race Review. We're still catching up on Patreon requests over here. Today, at the request of the Black Dragon disciple, Josh Pearson, we'll be covering the Changeling, who appears in the Advanced Race Guide and, most recently, in the supplement Blood of the Coven. If you have any requests for this series, make sure to throw them down in the comments. We'll get right on them. Before we get down to business, though, this episode of the Forgotten Race Review was brought to you in part by Lord Minot. My friend, thank you so much for your time and support. I look forward to seeing what you brew up in our upcoming tournament, but for now, let's talk about the Changelings. So, on planet Earth, a Changeling is a creature which we find in folklore and folk religion all over the place. A Changeling child was believed to be a fairy child that had been left in place of a human child. It's a common theme in medieval literature, and it reflects concern over infants thought to be afflicted with unexplained diseases, developmental disabilities, things of that nature. A human child might be taken to act as a servant. In rare cases, the very elderly of the fairy people would be exchanged in place of a human baby, so the old fairy could live in comfort being coddled as a baby. And of course, we would be remiss without mentioning Odo, from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, everyone's favorite security officer who can turn into a pile of goop and sleep in a bucket. Pathfinder's Changeling is the child of a humanoid and a hag. Hags are vile, malicious creatures by and large, and they command just enough maternal instinct to abandon the children of a union between themselves and a humanoid who often is killed afterwards on a convenient doorstep. Sometimes maybe they let the parent go and the child gets abandoned to them. But much like we see on planet Earth, the wickedest of hags secretly swaps out their own infants for those of others, damning innocent children to horrible ends. And it's in this way that most changelings grow up. They remain ignorant of their supernatural origins until their mothers eventually return to claim and transform their relatively human daughters into hags. You'll notice there I didn't say humanoid son or daughter, as all changelings in Pathfinder are female. Changelings are typically tall, slender, dark-haired, and attractive by and large, and they always resemble their father's race. So if your changeling came from an elf and a changeling, it would look like an elf. If your changeling came from a dwarf and a changeling, you get the idea. It can be really hard to distinguish a changeling from a regular humanoid. By and large, the big telltale giveaway is their mismatched colored eyes and abnormally pale skin. When a changeling reaches puberty, they receive something known as the Call, a spiritual voice that beckons them to travel and discover their true origins. Changelings can, of course, ignore this call, choose their own destiny, but those who heed it discover their mother and may come into great power by transforming into hags themselves. Changelings reach adulthood at 15 years, but again, this can be moved around depending on the race of the father. Their base height is 5 foot 2 inches. They max out at just under 6 feet and max out weight-wise at 125 pounds, some weighing as little as 95 pounds. The maximum age for a changeling is 70 plus 2d20 years, which is the same as a human, but again, if your changeling came from different parents, there's nothing saying that we can't change that around to match. Now, as of Blood of the Coven, we've received a whole mess of changeling variants based on the various hags that exist in Pathfinder. The Anise Hag, Ash Hag, Blood Hag, Dream Thief Hag, Green Hag, Mute Hag, Night Hag, Sea Hag, Storm Hag, and Winter Hag all have their own changeling variant. Today, we're talking about the regular basic changeling as it appears in the Advanced Race Guide. That particular changeling receives a +2 to its wisdom and charisma, but a -2 to its constitution. They're frail, but they're very clever and comely. Changelings are humanoids with the changeling subtype, size category medium, with a base speed of 30 feet. Changelings have a +1 natural armor bonus, as well as 2 claw attacks that deal 1d4 points of damage. They have dark vision out to 60 feet, and have a special racial trait depending on the hag that gave birth to them. If your vanilla changeling came from an Anise hag, it receives a +1 racial bonus on melee damage. The green hag gets a +2 racial bonus on bluff checks against creatures that are sexually attracted to her. The sea hag may hold their breath for a number of rounds, equal to 3 times their constitution, before they risk drowning. And we see these reflected in the hag racial traits in Blood of the Coven, of course, with the changeling variants that aren't Anise hags, green hags, or sea hags all receiving hag racial traits of their their own. Now, I've never played a Changeling before. I've been in parties with Changelings, but we've never really had the chance to delve in and explore what's going on there. There's always been too much going on for us to worry about the Changeling hearing the call. Frankly, it never came up. If I was to play a Changeling or GM for one, the call would obviously have to be a really big part of that Changeling's life, because a huge part of their life it really is. Once these guys come of age, they have a voice in the back of their head saying, "Hey, come find me. I'll turn you into a scary witch monster." And that right there makes the recipe for the adventurer. Perhaps your Changeling becomes a paladin or a cleric or a psychic so they can learn to control or better understand the voices in the back of their head. Perhaps they snap because there's a voice whispering in the back of their head after all, and they become something like an assassin, a barbarian, a mercenary. Of course, that last one isn't a class, but you get the idea. Someone who just needs to hear the sound of bones breaking to silence the voices in their head. I think also sooner or later, if I were to GM for a Changeling, I think their parents would have to come and find them. This is especially true if they want to play a character who's resisting the call, going on to become bigger than it. Perhaps they realize what they are at a very young age, and they live their whole life in service to the church or in service to arcane magic or what have you. Eventually, mom's gonna figure out that her daughter hasn't come to join the coven, and a Changeling PC is probably the best reason to put hags in your campaign, which I might have to do someday, because truly, of all the monsters in the world of Pathfinder, I've never thought about using hags before, outside of a conversation I had with Dave from Nerdarchy over on his channel. And who doesn't love a brand new plot hook after all? But what do you guys think about the Changeling? Have you ever played one? Have you ever GM'd for one? Or have you ever used hags in your campaign as an overarching set of monsters or big bads that harass the party? Don't forget, guys, thanks to the support on Patreon that keeps growing and growing, we'll be running Doomsday Dawn, the first ever published bit of material for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, right here on Black Dragon Gaming as soon as it drops. If you'd like to learn more about that giveaway, follow this card right up here. Remember that patronage does give you an extra entry in this and all of our future giveaways, and hey, if Patreon gets up even higher, we'll be able to run more than one party through what's shaping up to be a really amazing adventure. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos. The next episode of the Forgotten Race Review, where we take a step into the world of the broken and cover the pure-blooded Aslanti, drops next Monday.